Hey guys, welcome to BP the Bible Perspective. Let's talk about Bill Maher's all white panel, whitewashing racism. Now, before we get into it, please like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome. Now, last week's episode of Real Time with Bill Maher, he led a panel discussion that started off talking about how bad violence is getting in America. And then he quickly turned it towards we talk about race too much. And this whitewashing of racism has become quite common of late with Bill Maher. I refer to it as him slowly coming out of the white conservative closet, where all of a sudden now we focus too much on black issues. Now I'm going to play this segment and dissect it. I'm going to first play it in its entirety, then I'm going to go back and I want to dissect what he is saying, because as you can see, what some of the panel members there is ex-Congressman Tim Ryan, and then Barry Reese, I'm sorry. And I'm kind of surprised at Barry Reese. She's a feminist, an ultra feminist, a liberal. I'm not surprised with Tim Ryan, and we're going to hear each of their statements. But what is surprising, of course, about this panel is that they all claim to be liberal, down for the cause. And what you'll find is they're not so down for the cause. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play this segment in its entirety and then go back and dissect it.
It was a really rough week for watching violent videos. I got up today, the first thing I saw was the Paul Pelosi video, which was, there's just so much rage in this country. There have been 39 mass shootings already. We're not out of January. And then this week people learned the names of a couple of cities here in California, Half Moon Bay and Monterey Park was the other one, right? And these shootings happen. We go through this ritual where then we wait for them to announce the race of the shooter. Like we're waiting for the Oscar nominations, because that's somehow to a lot of people the most important thing. And I just thought it was very interesting that this week Asians were killed by Asians, two Asian men who were 66 and 72. And then this week we just got this video of the Memphis Five. A black man is brutally beaten in Memphis by 5 cops. They're all black. I guess what I'm asking is, America's culture of violence, it does go deeper than race, right? And I think this monofocus we have on race is short-circuiting us trying to fix some of the realer problems. Would you agree?
Well, definitely deeper concerns here, and this is an opportunity for us to have that conversation. The conversation about mental health, the conversation about guns, the conversation about
cops,
and the stress, and the stress that cops are under. I'm not defending these guys. Of course, this was a tragedy. They should be prosecuted, full extent of the law, the whole 9 yards. But if we don't, at some level, realize that it's not a white cop or a black cop, it's a cop who's under stress, who's underpaid. I have cops in my congressional district, Bill.
Is monofocused.
Okay, I'm breaking away because what just happened there was that they edited out about a minute of that segment. Now, I'm not for sure why they edited it out, and when I watched other videos to try to to record it, I could not find it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now play that edited out segment. I want to apologize up front because it is of poor quality, and but I think it is important that we hear these statements. Okay, so
basically think we should classify every weekend in Chicago as a hate crime. If that's what it's going to take to get people to pay attention, to the violence in this country. I feel the same way. I feel like we hear about a horrible incident and we wait to see the race or identity of the perpetrator and the race and identity of the victim, and we know exactly how it will play based on that. But to the family of the person that's murdered, does it matter? I don't really think it does.
It's also misleading. It's misleading that everything is always racial. I mean, I feel like this is one of the big flaws of the left these days, is they have this monofocus. You know, again, when the education system breaks down, people don't know a hell of a lot, so they focus on something that's very obvious, black and white. Everyone can understand racism, and of course it is still a real thing in this country. It's just not the only thing.
Right.
Is monofocus. You know, again, when the education system breaks down, people don't know a hell of a lot, so they focus on something that's very obvious, black and white. Everyone can understand racism, and of course it is still a real thing in this country. It's just not the only thing.
Right, and a black life should matter if the perpetrator of the crime is white, and a black life should matter if the perpetrator of the crime, as it often is in a city like Chicago, is black. And I think, you know, we haven't seen the video out of Memphis yet, but I'm sure it's going to be as horrible as the police chief there says it is. But I think, I hope that the takeaway from it is not the takeaway of the summer of 2020, which is that we need to defund the police so that worse people decide to go and become police officers. I mean, that is what we're living through right now.
And there's a big exodus from the police squads all
the
over the country.
LAPD is losing 50 police officers a week right now. You
And
call the LAPD, they will not show up for 30 minutes.
And who pays, again, with the woke, who pays for that when there's less police and less competent police? A lot of people of color in communities where they want more policing.
Right, and if you're in a community like mine, you can go and pay.
All right. So you heard that. I will now dissect this whitewashing of race. In other words, there's a lot of conflation going on with these statements, by the way. And I'm going to dissect that. But before I do, I want to address something in terms of when Bill said that it's black and white. It's not all of it always about race. Well, that's a poor whitewashing, if I say so myself, because you're not answering why it's always about race. In other words, he's not saying, okay, why do cops shoot unarmed black people? See, there's a reason for that. And if I just saw in the news where in California some cops shot an amputee, a guy who doesn't have both legs but was hobbling away. They shot him. Now, when he says, well, it's not always about race, well, why do you think that happens? Now, let me also do the disclaimer. And of course, some of what they're saying is true in terms of the news media, how the news media immediately will portray or corral the news, right, into a racial thing. But understand, they do that because it's usually a racial thing. But I want to kind of go back because, as I said, with this direction that Bill is seemed to be going, he's forgetting a couple of things. And that is, how did this nation get to the place of being racial? Why do we think in terms of race? Now what you have is people like Bill Maher who are trying to say, why does it always have to be about race without dealing with the origins of it? And right there you see part of the origins. That's a slave ship. Now, in another part of this segment, that I didn't tape, Bill said, "Well, we talking too much about race," and it was a kind of a slant towards critical race theory. Why are we talking about critical race theory? And again, conflating some issues where you may have some, to me, ill-advised teachers, how they are presenting race relations, racial healing, but that's not critical race theory, nor is it when you say you're focusing on the history of race. And what is amazing to me that he's not talking about what the moms of liberty are doing, what the daughters of the Confederacy have done. But right here, Bill claims that he was taught slavery in high school. I don't buy that. Bill is in his late 60s, which puts him being born somewhere around 1955, between 1955 and 1957, around that time. And I can guarantee you they didn't teach what you're looking at here. And certainly the vast majority of schools did not teach the accurate history of slavery. You're looking at a slave ship. This is how slaves were transported from Africa to the Americas. They were laid in the bow of the ship. And by the way, there wasn't nice, comfortable mattress either. And often they were chained, laid down in their urine and feces. When they arrived at the Americas, they were auctioned off like animals. Okay? Auctioned off as animals. This is how they were treated. Now, I'm showing you this briefly because my question is, why did America do this to these people? Okay? After slavery, you had Jim Crow. This is the terror of Jim Crow. I cropped some of these pictures because obviously I don't want to get flagged by YouTube. Alright? But look at this picture here. As you can see, like I say, I cropped it, but I want you to notice the little children. And so my question to Bill was he taught this in school? But these are grandmothers now, if they're still alive, okay? They're grandmothers. The reason why I'm showing you this is because what we're dealing with, and when we go back to the very origins of this nation, and you hear this clapback that they will say, well, the governor of Florida who was pushing back against black history, right? He won't teach this. It is against the law in Florida to teach the true history of America. But listen to this. Because when you stop and you think about how the seeds of racism were sown in America, the mind conditioning, in other words, remember what I said, let's start with this statement by one of the founders of America, right? With the Declaration of Independence, right? Which states that, and I'm just going to read just one sentence of it. He says, all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Now, this was written in the Declaration of Independence, right? Now, how then do you have this? Slavery. Well, you have to condition the minds. You have to change the minds. You got to say, these people, that what we're saying doesn't go for these people. So you condition the mind. Think about this. If you were walking along the street with your daughter, right? If you're walking along the street with your daughter and you came across this scene here, then what would you have felt? What do you think the fathers and the mothers taught their kids? Well, these people are not, they're inferior, right? They're not equal to us, despite that's what the Declaration of Independence taught. Thomas Jefferson himself owned slaves, thought blacks were inferior, fathered children with one of his slaves, while at the same time penning this great, magnificent piece of literature, right? All men are created equal. Well, you have to change the minds of people. That's how you did that. And then worse, after slavery, it continued on that black people were inferior, right? It was legal to look at how the people come out. Now, of course, like I said, what you're witnessing a picture of, I cropped it out, like I say, because it is a horrible picture, but it's also an intricate part of American history. Look at the crowds of people right there. Some of them were business owners, school teachers, judges, police officers, Sunday school teachers, pastors, right? So look at what is being conditioned. So when we talk about, this need for race to be taught, by the way, this is not being taught. The one thing that you don't see is that being taught in its history. In fact, as I told you before, that Governor Santos has wiped away, okay? They made it illegal to teach that kind of history in Florida as we speak. In 2023, amazing. Now let's go back and unpack. I'm going to play the clip. So let's now dissect what he said.
It was a really rough week for watching violent videos. I got up today, first thing I saw was the Paul Pelosi video, which was, there's just so much rage in this country. There have been 39 mass shootings already. We're not out of January. And then this week people learned the names of a couple of cities here in California, Half Moon Bay and Monterey Park was the other one, right?
So he starts off talking about the violence, right? And in each case that he was referring to, now think about this, the 39 mass shootings, was race a key factor in even in the reporting of these stories? The fact that you would have, now, race did come into play with the last two that he mentioned. And what was interesting about this, of course, they're dealing with the uptick of Asian attacks. But watch what he says.
And these shootings happen. We go through this ritual where then we wait for them to announce the race of the shooter. Like we're waiting for the Oscar nominations, because that's somehow to a lot of people the most important thing. And I just thought it was very interesting that this week.
Well, my question is, who's waiting for that? Who's waiting for, come on, and announce it, and announce it, and announce it? Aren't people more concerned that it happened? Now, I understand what he's saying, but race is a key factor in this nation, and that's why. Race is a key factor. All right, let's continue.
Asians were killed by Asians, two Asian men who were, 66 and 72. And then this week we just got this video of the Memphis Five. A black man is brutally beaten in Memphis by 5 cops. They're all black. I guess what I'm asking is America's culture of violence, it does go deeper than race.
Well, he's conflating now the culture of violence with the race and the culture of race and violence. The fact that you had two Asian mass shootings, and let's just say even if you had within the last 30 days, every ethnic group mass shooting, it doesn't erase the racism that still persists in this nation. And this is what he's trying to do. He said, well, the violence goes deeper than race. No, it doesn't. One is one thing, and the other is another thing. The fact that you have in every ethnicity that they are killed by their own. So, for example, whites are more likely to be killed by other whites. Hispanics are more likely to be killed by other Hispanics. Asians are more likely to be killed by other Asians. Blacks are more likely to be killed by other blacks. That's statistically true. So he's conflating here what the idea of the culture of racism that has what was sown into the mindsets of America. And he's trying to separate the two as if racism in America no longer exists or is minimized. All right.
Right. And I think this monofocus we have on race is short-circuiting us trying to fix some of the realer problems. Would you agree?
Well, definitely deeper concerns here, and this is an opportunity for us to have that conversation. The conversation about mental health, the conversation about guns, the conversation about
Cops.
the cops, and the stress, and the stress the cops are under. I'm not defending these guys. Of course, this was a tragedy. They should be prosecuted, full extent of the law, the whole 9 yards. But if we don't, at some level, realize that it's not a white cop or a black cop, it's a cop who's under stress, who's underpaid. I have cops in my congressional district, Bill.
Okay, so did you hear what he just said? And this man actually just said this. Now, this is ex-Congressman Tim Ryan. He said that the reason why it's not about white cops or black cops. That is the most absurd thing I think I've heard with this. Now, Bill is saying some crazy stuff, but that's crazy. Let me read you a list of names here. Tamara Rice, Eric Gardner, John Crawford, Michael Brown, Philando Castile, Terrence Crutcher, Stephon Clark, Botham Jean, Ronald Green, Elijah McClain, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, all killed by cops. And is he seriously trying to say that these people, innocent, right, people, or and even if they wasn't so innocent, they didn't deserve to die? Is he saying that it was stress that drove the cops to murder them? Tamara Rice was 12 years old, and upon the arrival of the police, he was shot dead within 2 seconds. What's the stress here? The problem with policing and police and how they treat African Americans is the same. We go back to the mentality that was conditioned. See, that how white people were conditioned to see black people. When a cop sees a black person, he sees an animal. And let me also say this. Cops are not under any stress or fear. Because think about this, they are shooting unarmed people. What was the threat in 12-year-old Tamara Rice? Eric Gardner, if you remember, he was selling he was accused, or he thought he was selling what they call loosey cigarettes or loose cigarettes. They jumped on him like a pack of wolves. What was the threat there? John Crawford was shopping in Walmart. In other words, the idea of when cops see black people. Now, I said this before. Just in the news recently, I'm talking about just within the last 24 hours, there's a story about some cops out in California and the LA area who shot and killed a man who was a double amputee. In other words, no legs. He is literally wobbling away on his stubs, and they shoot him dead. Now you tell me, where's the stress? Now, I will say this in acknowledgement. First and foremost, when you pin a badge on anyone, the temptation, the arrogance, and the pride is always there. But that's not the issue with black and white. That's not the issue here. We're talking about the way white people, and let me tell you, some view African Americans. And if you want to say, well, the Memphis cops were black, sure, the same. When you go back to the history of racism, black people were complicit because they were conditioned. That's why you had field Negroes and house Negroes. That's why you had the term Sambo. Uncle Tom is kind of a misused term. But you always had black people who were just, who made themselves the enemy of their fellow Africans to court favor with whites. And not only that, but you have black people who, yes, themselves would see their fellow African and African Americans the same way some white people see African Americans. Here's what you don't see. Those cops, you would never see those 5 black cops treat a white person that way. You just won't see it. I'm going to pick this up in part 2, and we're going to continue dissecting this statement, guys, because again, it is interesting to me. So don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP, the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you ever thought a comment, add it to the comments section below. All comments are welcome, and I'll see you in part 2.